I want to thank you for taking time to be on our show. You're always so willing. We appreciate it so much.
Coach, my pleasure. Anytime.
And you do a great job. I enjoy seeing you on television. I wanted to ask you something about the East. Tennessee has got 4 winnable games. They're not going to be easy. 4 winnable games, and we don't know who's going to win the Georgia-Florida game this weekend. Sort of evaluate those 3 teams. One of those 3 is going to be the representative in Atlanta. Sort of evaluate that for us.
Well, I think last time I was on, we talked a lot about Tennessee being the favorite in the East, and mainly because, in my mind, because they had so much talent coming back, and we've seen the value of that leadership and those veteran players and all of their comeback wins over the entire course of the season. Of course, they couldn't get it done against Alabama, but nobody can so far this season. And what I really thought was going to be a huge benefit to Tennessee was finishing up this big run, which they've now finished, right? I mean, they got smoked by Alabama, but they were able to get through Florida and Georgia, and they lost that crazy game at A&M, and then they lost to Alabama. And I think 2-2 through that 4-game stretch is about as good as anybody can hope to do. And while they do have 2 conference losses, they do not have a loss within their division.
Yeah.
South Carolina is an eminently winnable game. They've got a lot of deficiencies. Kentucky, Missouri, and Vanderbilt all have the same thing to say. And so if you looked at the way Tennessee finished last season and the way their schedule plays out really year after year, this is an area where they can just kind of put it in cruise control. And it's so important for them to be able to let off the gas a little bit because everybody's banged up right now. Now Alvin Kamara is going to be out a couple of weeks. But it's a huge benefit that Tennessee has that I don't think anyone else has, in that they will be allowed to become healthy without truly challenging games on their schedule. They'll be favored to win out. They'll get Tennessee Tech mixed in there out of conference. And so I still think they're in great shape to get back to Atlanta. The biggest detriment, the biggest roadblock in Florida's path is, they've really got 2 of them. I'm not really sold on Georgia. I think offensively, especially at the quarterback position, Georgia's got a lot of question marks. But the fact that Florida now will indeed have to play LSU, and they'll have to go there to play it thanks to the bungling of dealing with Hurricane Matthew, I think probably in many respects serves Florida right. But that's probably a game they lose, and to be quite honestly, Florida's not a perfect team, so they could also drop another game before they even get to LSU. Yeah. So I still think, guys, that Tennessee's the team to beat. I would feel much differently if Tennessee had another tough game or 2 left on the schedule simply because of the Volunteers' injuries, but they've got over a month to get healthy. And they, if you think about it, they got a month and a half to get healthy before they would be playing in Atlanta, and that's a huge benefit to Butch's team.
Yep.
Yeah, we're talking with Tom Hart. Tom, rank the top 5 SEC teams for me. Obviously, Alabama's number 1. You've seen these teams up close. I don't think there's a team in the East that I would put in the top 5. Personally, maybe Florida. But 2 through 5, rank the SEC for me.
All right, so Alabama we know is number 1, right?
Yeah.
So can I put Alabama in all 5 spots?
Yeah, you could do that, but let's we understand that. So the easy part's Alabama. I'm just asking you to do 2 through 5. I gave you the first question. I gave you the first answer, Alabama.
I needed all the answers I could get when I was in school, so I appreciate that. I'll put 2 teams in the number 2 spot right now. I still like Texas A&M a lot.
Yeah, I do too.
So I've got A&M. So A&M has been there for me all season. I told you guys a month ago that they're my dark horse. So I like A&M a lot, and I love the way Auburn is playing right now. And I love the progress that they've made over the course of the season, especially the offensive play calling and the quarterback play. So I'll put those 2 tied for 2. And then my 4th spot would have to be LSU. I'm still waiting to see, that Alabama game obviously will tell us a lot. Even if you don't expect them to win it, it'll tell us a lot about where LSU is as a program. And then I'll put Tennessee there in that fifth spot, only because I'm really curious and concerned about what's going on with Arkansas. And, I expected more from them. To be fair, you play in the toughest division in all of college football, and there are going to be some losses here and there. But to lose the way they have recently, I think probably shows more warts than beauty marks. So I'll put one team from the East in there, and that's Tennessee, and that's based upon performance thus far, and where I think they'll end up at the end of the season.
Tom, Jonathan Allen came out, and I said this last week. I think the Alabama defensive players and the coaching staff, they were sick of hearing that Trevor Knight beat Alabama, and I think the coaches used it. That's all they beat that drum, and you could see Jonathan Allen look like Superman when he jumped, and he had that one sack. But he even came out and said it in the paper that they were just tired of hearing about it. I think Leonard Fournette is sick and tired of him hearing that Alabama shut him down. I think this guy's got fresh legs. It's a night game down there. I think he has circled this game. In your opinion, will Leonard Fournette, now obviously he's going to need his line, will he be able to run the ball against Alabama? I think he will.
First of all, that Jonathan Allen sack was one of the sickest things I've seen in a while.
Yeah.
That was amazing. I've learned not to doubt Leonard Fournette, and I hope he has a huge game, and I hope he's healthy. I've got a couple games. This is a typical Tuesday for me. I've got a game on the iPad right now and a game on the television in front of me as I do my prep work, and I'm watching what LSU did as a whole against Missouri without Fournette. He didn't play in that Missouri game. 152 yards a game, and they're still up 28-0 against a very good running defense from Missouri. So, not that Missouri's defense is in the same category as Alabama's. I think he'll be able to run, and I think what Orgeron and company have been doing recently is only going to help Fournette. I think the biggest question with Les Miles early in the season is they had a couple games where they really needed Fournette, and maybe he was more hurt than was letting on, but I was really curious as to why they didn't use him more in some of those games. They seem to get away from him. I don't think that's going to be an issue with Orgeron, and I don't think motivation is going to be an issue for either Leonard Fournette or anyone in that stadium that night. I mean, that is going to be a rambunctious spot. And we have seen some incredible games already this year. Tennessee and Texas A&M, Tennessee and Georgia with two Hail Marys towards the end of the game. It's another incredible year in the Southeastern Conference, and I think that game with Alabama at LSU has all the makings of being another heavyweight fight that is going to have the entire nation's attention. You look back, I was lucky enough to get home from South Carolina in time to pop up my couch in Atlanta and watch Ohio State and Penn State the other night. And as you're watching that game and you're watching the energy build in Happy Valley in that stadium, and if you haven't been there, I'm not going to say it's an SEC stadium, but it has all the makings of it. You know what I mean? I mean, they have an entire community and state behind their team, and when they're good, that place is magical and as tough to win as any place, man. The whiteout going, and even though you knew Ohio State was the better team, there is such a huge home field advantage in college football that you were just waiting for something to go right for Penn State and something to go wrong for Ohio State. And next thing you know, you get a block kick and they take it back, and that's the ball game. So that when I watch games like that played at that level of intensity with that level of support, in a home stadium against a top-tier opponent, I think everybody's beatable on the road in those situations, and even Alabama.
Yeah,
so
no doubt.
That's what I'm looking for.
Those Penn State men, I mean, they showed grown men. They were jumping about, crying their eyes out in the stadium. And I guess that's just from all the built-up stuff that's going on there. They were just letting it out. That was an amazing atmosphere at the end of that game.
And let me tell you a quick Penn State story if you have the time. So I was calling games in the Big Ten during Joe Paterno's last season on the sideline. Actually, he spent most of that season up in the booth. If you remember, he was coaching from the press box because he had a hip or a knee injury. But we were there for his second-to-last game. It was against Purdue. And we were talking about they had a game either earlier that season or the year before, I forget which, against Alabama. And I said, Coach, how did this Alabama game come about? And he said, well, we had it scheduled a few years ago, but Mal Moore called me up, and he asked if I wouldn't mind rescheduling. They had a conflict, and we had a really good team, and they were just kind of still trying to build back up. And I said, sure, no problem. And so we rescheduled it for this year. And I said, but Coach, Alabama is Alabama, and you guys are now rebuilding. Why would you play that game now? I said, do you feel a responsibility? And please, when I tell this story, if we can, just try and remove I know it's impossible, remove everything else that happened around that program and with Paterno. And I know that's hard to do, but I wasn't aware of any of that at this point. I said, do you feel a responsibility as a steward of the game, given all your years of commitment to this game, that's a game that college football fans need to see? And he said, I don't think you should ever back down from an opponent. And if we're Penn State and we have a chance to play Alabama, I understand that we probably can't win that game and we're going to be underdogs. But our fans deserve it, and college football deserves a game like that. And that really struck me, and I thought, you think about the great coaches in all sports these days and their willingness to go play those games. Saban has certainly done it. Tom Izzo does it with Michigan State every year. They play these impossible games, usually neutral sites, to get back home at 3 o'clock in the morning. Mike Krzyzewski leaves campus to go do it. Roy Williams does it. And it happens in college football. I wish it would happen more. And I wish we would see more big non-conference games, even though we all know the SEC teams have to run a gauntlet at some point. I just think it's great for the sport. And Ohio State going into Penn State and playing on ABC in prime time with a whiteout and sold-out stadium and knowing everything that those fans have been through and how much that program means to them, I just thought that was a great moment for the entire sport. And in this day and age, with a busy sports calendar, with the World Series starting and the NFL going on, it takes something to separate yourself, and those games are great for the sport of college football.
Tom, when we get to the Michigan-Ohio State game, let's say Ohio State wins. It puts things in a little bit of a frenzy as to who they would select. I think Washington, you can answer this as well. Washington, I think, is worthy of it if they go undefeated. I think because I don't think Michigan's schedule has been very hard. I would assume that we've got one ACC and one SEC team in. Where do we stand with the Big Ten with a loss to Michigan by Ohio State? And do you think that Washington is worthy enough to pick up that fourth spot?
Man, I think it's too early, Wimp. I think it's too early to answer that question because there's another wild card in there, and that's Louisville.
Yeah.
That loss that they had at Clemson was, to me, as good, and it's going to sound silly to rate it this way, but as good a loss as Ohio State's loss at Penn State. In fact, it's a better loss because Louisville was the dog playing at Clemson. So if you had to rate both of them, I would say, well, gosh, Louisville deserves it more than Ohio State based on the quality of their loss. Now, the problem for Louisville is that the quality of their schedule going forward isn't such that they're going to have an opportunity to impress the rest of the way. But I think Louisville's as much a wild card as anybody. If Ohio State comes back and beats Michigan, they have one loss and they win the Big Ten championship game. I think it's impossible to keep Ohio State out. Right. It would be easier to keep Michigan out because, you mentioned it, they're not going to have played a very tough schedule at all.
Right.
They're really playing one game, and you consider what they're going to be really hurt by is the fact that Michigan State has fallen off the ledge.
Yeah.
And so that is no longer a big quality win for Michigan where you can say, hey, look at this. We beat Michigan State and Ohio State. Or we lost to Ohio State. We got a big win against Michigan State. We're a one-loss team.
Yeah.
So right now, I guess, I'm guessing here, but I would put Louisville in ahead of Michigan.
Okay.
And I I would have Washington in ahead of Michigan simply because of the quality of their schedule. They haven't played anybody, and they won't have played anybody that's made much notice. I might feel different about that come, a month from now, come Thanksgiving weekend.
Right.
In retrospect, you look back after another 4 or 5 weeks of football, it might look better, but it doesn't right now.
I'm looking at West Virginia's schedule here. If they get past Oklahoma State on the road, they got Oklahoma at home. They're at Texas. They got Kansas at home. I don't see a loss on their schedule if they can get past this weekend. With West Virginia, if they run the table, will they jump a Louisville and get into the Final Four?
I just don't see it.
Kind of like Nebraska. I don't think.
Well, Nebraska's going to have to pay those big boys, and they're going to lose. I think once they get to the big boys, they haven't played them yet.
Yeah, I just don't have a whole lot of confidence in the Big 12 as a whole, and I don't have the, I don't have the strength of schedule and numbers in front of me right now. Baylor will be an interesting study as well in terms of how they do. So I'm pulling up the West Virginia schedule right now. I mean, they beat a BYU team on a neutral site, a BYU team with 4 losses, and that's the best non-conference win. That doesn't do much for me. They closed with Baylor on December 3rd. That would be your de facto championship. And then on the other side, Baylor, once again, hasn't played anybody non-conference. SMU and Rice are there. That doesn't do anything for me. So, it would be a tough and bitter pill to swallow for the Big 12. But right now, I'd have the Big 12 outside of the Pac-12.
Yeah, I agree.
5 power conferences for 4 spots, right? So the Big 12 champion, even if it's West Virginia or Baylor and they're undefeated, I would have them out, and I would probably have them out outside of a 1-loss Louisville team. The one caveat I'd put in there is that, the committee has said a conference championship carries weight and means something. So that might be a knock for them. But let's also remember that Louisville had a game that was most of us expected. It's a Thursday night here in a few weeks. Most of us expected to be a big game for them, and that was against Houston. But Houston now has 2 losses.
Yeah.
And so that is not as powerful and sexy a win as would be if Lamar Jackson and Louisville knock off Houston. So I think getting off the bus, I think Louisville's a better team than all of those Big 12 teams. And if you put them in the Big 12, they would probably win it and run away with it, and they would play some highly entertaining games in the Big 12. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, the initial ranking will tell us a lot. Where they have West Virginia, Nebraska. If they got them ahead of Louisville, then I think Louisville's got some trouble. But I look at we got to go. But I look at that one score. West Virginia goes to Texas Tech and beats them 48-17, and I look at Texas Tech putting 58 on Oklahoma. So that was pretty impressive there to go to Lubbock and hold that team to 17 points.
I tell you what, that Texas Tech-Oklahoma game was another one I had on the other night. It's a great time to be a college football fan. That one kind of flew under the radar, but that was a Wild West shootout. I mean,
that's flag football.
That was like, guys, from a basketball perspective, that was like LSU playing Loyola Marymount back in the day. Yeah, that was a ton of fun.
That was flag football. All right, Tom, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, gentlemen, anytime.
Appreciate it very much.